Here I am, climbing up, feeling great, getting love. Here I go, risk it all, be worth it now, and that's for sure. Watch me as I rock a team.
All right, here we are, episode 15, if you can believe that, of Fight Talk Down Under. Oh, of course, I'm Dan Meehan from Fight News Australia, and my co-host is featherweight superstar, lockjaw, Justin Van Heerden. How are you, mate?
Yeah, no, can't complain. We're what episode is this? Like 15? We're at 15? Man.
Yep, just said 15. Yep.
No, holy shit. Look at us go. 15, yeah. So I'm excited. Another episode. Yeah, no, things are going good, man. Like back in the gym. Obviously, straight away after my last fight, I was back in the gym. Volk's in camp. We've got a couple of amateurs, getting ready for Wollongong Wars. We got, some of the other top Australian fighters like Josh Culibao, he's in camp. So, obviously there's frequent people making themselves frequent at freestyle at the moment. Everyone's in camp. Everyone's got fights lined up. So it's all happening. So, yeah, I can't complain. I mean, I'm pretending to be Max Holloway, and my body is copping it certainly because I'm standing in front of Volko a lot, trying to pretend to be Max Holloway, and that's just not how I fight. I'm the best boxer in the UFC. Yeah, it's not boxing. And also, I can tell why the cunt has the most punches sustained to the face as well. He's got that record as well. I can see why. No, obviously, I'm just joking around. Max is still a pretty handy dude. So yeah, I'm excited to see this fight, and it's dope being in camp and helping out the champ get ready.
Absolutely, yeah. You got sort of front row seats there, don't you, to the master at work, really. So, it's all happening down at Freestyle Fighting Gym.
Yep. We're getting after it. Everyone's in fine form. Joe's in fine form. The boys are in fine form. So yeah, it's going to be like another banter-filled, hard work-filled fucking camp at Freestyle.
Absolutely. Well, here at Fight Talk Down Under, we've got another big episode. It's going to be a bit of a boxing heavy one this time around. So we're going to be covering No Limit Boxing from last week, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about Charlo versus Castano and what that might mean for Tim Tszyu, as well as some a bit of a follow up on the PED talk as well. So
yep,
yeah, fair bit to cover off. It's been a hot topic in the on the local scene since we opened that can of worms. So yeah, we'll revisit that later in the episode. We'll start off with the boxing. Last week, No Limit Boxing, Gallen versus Tashevsky went down, I guess as we predicted in the main event, Tashevsky was the stronger boxer. He had a pretty good arsenal, good sort of range of punches. But I don't know about you, but I thought maybe probably didn't really see too much to suggest that he's going to be sort of, that he's a world-class contender or anything like that. But, he got a little bit tired towards the end, which I'm not sure if that's sort of the, the stress of a big main event or just fighting a big sort of physical guy like Paul Gallen, but he got the job done in the end. As the boxing skills were just too much for Paul Gallen.
Yeah, and I think going into it too, I think obviously Paul Gallen made it clear that he's not coming into box; he's coming into just scrap. So, and that's what he tried to do, and obviously it didn't end up paying off for him. Like there was moments where it was sort of competitive, and Gallen was able to sort of land some shots and do his thing a little bit. But yeah, I just kind of, in a fight like this, where you're fighting someone like Paul Gallen, who doesn't have the same boxing pedigree, doesn't have the same experience, doesn't have the same sort of time invested into the sport, I kind of expected, I expected more, if I'm honest. And I think for Paul Gallen to be able to kind of make it to the end of the fight, and then also towards the end, it seemed like he was kind of pushing forward a bit more. That's kind of a bit worrying, especially in this weight. If you're going to fight some of these top dudes in the sport at this weight class, like, man, that's going to be pretty rough if you start getting into them sort of later rounds and you can't push and can't keep the same sort of pace and, can't kind of match that same sort of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And pardon me, for Paul Gallen's part, we saw he had a bit of trouble pulling the trigger really, and Tashevsky was kind of just a younger, better boxer in the end. But I guess Paul Gallen, he normally fights guys of a sort of a similar vintage to himself, or maybe a similar sort of experience level to himself. So maybe this was it was an interesting test for him to come up against a guy who's kind of been boxing his whole life and has a decent record, but. It looks like Tashevsky has his eye on the bridgerweight division. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a new division that's in between cruiserweight and heavyweight.
Which is good.
It looks like he's a good size for that. I remember seeing him at the weigh-in, and he's tall, but he sort of didn't really look that big for heavyweight. So
nah.
His view on it is that the bridgerweight division would be sort of a fast track to
world title.
World title contention. So. But he's also been called out by Justice Hooney in the in the days following the Gallen fight. So we know obviously Justice Hooney has beaten Paul Gallen himself. It was a bit of a one-sided beatdown, and it sounds like a terrible matchup for Tashevsky for me, really. But I think he'll probably find that it's the most lucrative opportunity that might be out there for him. He can go and attack the bridgerweight division, but I think right now he's got a bit of momentum. He's just won a big main event, and Hooney's probably going to be the fight that makes sense.
Yeah, and especially with the events that No Limit's doing too. I mean, it's going to give him an opportunity to kind of jump at what's potentially going to be a big paycheck for him here. Locally. And then obviously if you win that sets you up quite nicely. Then if you want to pursue the bridgerweight division and start getting these fights and racking up and getting sort of, the international sort of opponents and start working your way towards a world title, then you can do that. But I think, on paper, it's a rough matchup, but, it could be the little stepping stone or the boost that he needs to sort of propel himself forward and kind of, make himself a more of a profitable cash cow type fight for some of these other guys. It's got to be lucrative, and boxing's all about that. At the end of the day, I mean,
it's prize fighting at the end of the day, isn't it?
It's prize fighting. It's boxing so big on that side of things as well. It's kind of like if you can throw these matchups together where financially it's going to sort of just benefit everyone, and at the end of the day benefit the promoter, then you kind of want that. So they're going to kind of steer things in that way and try and do that. For example, you didn't just watch Hardman and Zarafa just for the sake of Hardman and Zarafa being like a fight that was so easy to sell, because they were both, very, very vocal on social media, very vocal with each other. They were sort of, going back and forth. But at the end of the day, that fight got put together because it's going to put money in the promoter's pocket. So that's kind of like a big thing in boxing. It's a big thing in combat sports in general, but boxing, they've got a few more years up their sleeve when it comes to some of these other combat sports like MMA and kickboxing and stuff like that. So they know how to work the fights, work the momentum, and kind of set it up that it's going to be the most lucrative thing for everybody. But obviously the fighter is going to benefit from that. And when it gets to these certain things, you start throwing some of these fights together, you start getting to the point where you have a matchup like you're going to see now with Kambosos and Haney. Obviously, they're going to make money. It's going to be a massive thing, but the people promoting that are going to be cashing some checks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know. I feel like it's a bit of a free swing for Tashevsky as well. I don't think a loss to Justice Hooney is really going to hurt him too much in terms of his pursuit of the bridgerweight. If he does want to go on to bridgerweight, obviously he's going to have to fight Hooney at heavyweight. But I think once he goes down to bridgerweight, he can kind of, sort of build up again, because I don't think there's that many fighters at bridgerweight. So really, there's not going to be too many sort of domestic fighters that he can fight in that division that are sort of going to, sort of make him sort of any sort of lucrative offers over here. So, he may as well sort of strike while the iron's hot, win, lose or draw, take on Justice Hooney, cash some, get some money, and move on to bridgerweight if that's what he wants to do.
100%. You're kind of going to start off as if you lose at heavyweight, you're going to kind of start off with a clean slate in a new division, and then kind of build yourself up. It's kind of like, even using Canelo as a sort of an example, he's a world champion in 4 different weight classes. He went up again now to try and, take that other risk and fight, up in weight again. It didn't work out, obviously, but at the end of the day, that doesn't hurt his other, position in some of these other weight classes. He's still solidified there. And I think that's always the benefit, especially now, they've made this a new division. This guy's fighting at heavyweight. He's not really a heavyweight, really. And then there's the benefit is no matter if you win or lose, you're going to be able to drop down to the division, this new division. You're going to be able to pursue that and get yourself some, a couple of good fights. And next thing you know, you're fighting for a world title. But if you win the fight, then you're going to come into that division with even more momentum. So it's win-win, really. Like if I was his team and his people behind him, I'd say, just fuck, let's take it. Let's go for it.
Yeah, I think that's the likely scenario. I think that's what's going to happen. While his name's sort of on everyone's lips and he's a recognisable face, and he may as well take a fight like that. It would presumably be the biggest paycheck or the biggest paycheck outside of a fight with Paul Gallen that that he could get. So he may as well. And you know what? Like he's 11-1-1 now. Let's say he loses to Justice Hooney, he'd be 11-2-1. We know boxing's big on sort of undefeated records and things like that, but not so much at Bridgerweight, I don't think. It's a bit of a different scenario there. Like, Bryant Jennings, for example, is in that Bridgerweight division, and he's, collected some losses along the way, and it hasn't really hurt his chances of, fighting for world titles there. So I don't think it hurts too much.
I think at the heavier weights, it's a bit different. Like, even at heavyweight now, like obviously Joshua's had a couple of losses recently. If he comes back, beats Usyk, fights Fury, if they throw that together, if he can beat Usyk and Fury, regardless of those losses that he's got on his record to like Ruiz, Usyk, and that sort of stuff, he's the greatest heavyweight to ever do it. If he can come back now while everyone's in their prime, beat those two guys, regardless of those losses on his record, he's probably the greatest or one of the greatest heavyweights to ever do it. So I think, in the heavier weight classes, the O isn't as important as some of the lighter weight classes for some reason. I kind of get that vibe. Like it's like with Floyd Mayweather kind of set that tone for some of the lighter weight divisions. He's obviously undefeated, blah, blah, kind of kept that, was very smart about how they did things. They kind of set it up that way that they could have everything in their favor all the time because they were the cash cow. They were kind of the A side and could dictate that. So I feel like in the lighter weight classes, that's always going to be the thing. And it is going to hurt you a bit more. If you go out there, you're undefeated, then you lose, it's going to set you back a little bit. But I think in the heavyweight weight classes, it doesn't matter as much. It's just like, because there's less people to fight. Even in a sport with multiple sort of sanctioning bodies, with multiple belts, there's still not that many people fighting at some of the heavier weight classes. So, at the end of the day, a loss isn't going to hurt you as much as it would in some of these other stacked weight classes.
Yeah, it doesn't set you back as much, and you've probably got a bit more time as well in those heavier weight classes. They say that your power is the last thing to leave you, and most heavyweights and Bridgerweights and that sort of thing aren't really blessed with a whole lot of hand speed outside of Tyson Fury. So
we've seen Rocky Balboa. We've seen the one where he comes back, he's old as shit, and he's fighting and he's hitting the fucking cow carcass and he's doing his thing, and they're just talking about power. You can do that shit. Okay, that's my plan. When I get to like 40, I'm gonna fight at like light heavyweight or some shit like that, and that's it. I'm just gonna be like have that DC body and just come in with power, just trying to fucking sleep dudes. That's it. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, just drink 12 eggs for breakfast and just bulk up.
You start eating Popeye's chicken, KFC, all that sort of stuff. Just be a fat mess, but still trying to get out there and fight with all my knowledge and experience.
Yeah, just big country.
Yeah, so I mean, I think definitely though, in the heavier weight classes, you see people just pursue their careers a bit longer. Like, I mean, Hopkins is a great example of that. The dude still fought when he was like 50, and he was still beating dudes when he was 50. So,
yeah, he was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, he's a bit of an outlier, but like, it can happen.
It can happen. Yeah, it's probably not something to aspire to. I think for every one Bernard Hopkins that's out there, there's probably hundreds or even thousands of guys that have made ill-advised comebacks and fallen flat in their 40s. So
I think I saw that on a T-shirt. I think it was for every Bernard Hopkins out there, there's like 500 Peter McNeelys. Maybe.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah, we've seen so many of them just get face planted in in comebacks. But yeah, you never know. Yeah, there's people like Hopkins and Glover Teixeira and those sorts of guys out there. So George Foreman can be done. So let's not let age weary us. And this is a guy who was just whinging off air before about being too old at 34 after going to the gym for the first time in about 2 years. So
yeah, see, maybe you should draw on that. Be like, no, I can. I'm going to do this till I can still do this. I can still do this.
I can. Yeah, maybe it's not time to let go just yet.
If Glover can win a UFC title at like 55,000 years old, I can still do this.
Yeah, that's right.
No, he's not quite that old.
I'm inspired. The comeback's on. The comeback's on. All right. All jokes aside, also on the No Limit boxing card was Nikita Tszyu. Obviously a heavily hyped prospect. He took on Mason Smith, who was undefeated going into the fight. He was full of confidence going into it, and he sure took the fight to Nikita Tszyu early on. But Nikita stayed composed, and he's got some power. He put Mason Smith away in the first round, and that was that.
Yeah, he kind of I mean, expected Mason to come out and get after it hard, and kind of just do that after the sort of the build up to the fight and the confidence that he had, like you said. But Nikita just did his thing. Fuck, that dude looks like he can crack, man. And he just, just bashed him, kind of put him away. So, and we're not surprised by that result. And I think when we broke it down, we kind of expected, like, you look at it on paper, you kind of expect, and you look at his other fights he's had so far, you kind of expected that was going to be the case. But fuck, didn't he just get out there and ring his bell properly when he was in there?
Yeah, he did, and there's real shades of his brother, and even of his dad as well. Like just the composure under fire. Like it would be easy in your second pro fight to sort of just turtle up on the ropes, or just sort of try and just sort of ride it out for the first round or two, weather the storm, as they say early on. But you can see his eyes were open the whole time. He was watching, he was looking, and he picked his shots, and and he cracked him hard once that opening was there, and he put him away.
So he kind of, I mean, it's, even though that was to be expected, the result that we kind of looked at and kind of like, okay, this is probably the most likely outcome for this fight. Now, I'm saying that with no disrespect to Mason. It's like just, it's hard to take the fight for what it is and then look at what's presented to you on paper and not be like, all right, well, this is probably the most likely outcome. But it kind of just like lived up to that. So, it'd be interesting to see how they do that. Are they going to have the same approach they have with Timmy, and they're going to gradually give him a step up each time and sort of to see what's next for him? Because you've seen 2 fights into your pro career and you've starched the dudes that you fought so far. So are we gonna see him take that little step up in the next one, or are they just gonna maybe throw a curveball his way and give him like a big test and kind of see what he's really made of? We don't know.
Yeah, I think it's he's 2-0. I think he's 24 years old, so I think they'd be wise to still build him up slowly, just keep testing him. Because there's going to be situations that I don't know if they put him in there with I don't know, Dennis Hogan or someone like that. Probably, someone like that is just going to bring something to him that he's not going to be able to deal with, and so I think they're going to need to build him up slowly and just sort of get him that ring time. Obviously he's put his first 2 opponents away pretty early, but I think he's eventually going to come up against someone who's going to sort of keep him in the ring for a little bit longer and expose him to some more different situations. But I think he's with that. He's obviously going to be well managed. He's with the same group as his brother, and I think they're going to be careful with him, because, like we said, the undefeated record is important. You look at his brother at the moment, and we'll get to that. But his brother's undefeated, and he's getting sort of disrespected by the champion still. So we'll get to that later on. But with the Nikita Tszyu stoppage, did it look a little bit early to you? Do you think Mason Smith could have been given another crack at it, or do you reckon he was already on Queer Street?
I mean, I think boxing there's always usually a bit more leeway with the because it's not like being from the MMA side of things. Like for myself, like I look at it and I go, okay, well. In boxing, if you get you get fucking cracked, there's a bit more leeway, and obviously, there's a bit more opportunity for you to then get up, give it another go. But so yeah, potentially, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not Mason, and fucking Nikita, like we spoke about, it looks like he can crack, man. So I don't know. He might have just been. There might have been sort of like a saving grace for him almost. Obviously the dude wants to get back in there and fight again, probably ASAP, like everyone does. So, do you want to like have that extra shot to get back up to your feet and go again, just to get hit again, and then get fucking really messed up, and then you have to take like a longer time off and cop some unnecessary brain damage you didn't need to cop. So it's a weird one, but as a fighter, I'm gonna always be like, yeah, fuck, just give him, give the dude a bit more time, let him get after it. But maybe, objectively, it's probably not the smart option.
Yeah, I think particularly early in fighters' careers as well, I think it's important that they sort of live to fight another day. You don't really want to be seeing guys getting folded in their first sort of few fights because you only get so many of those before you start sort of doing permanent damage. So maybe the referee was well advised to save the fighter from himself, really.
Yeah, 100%. So I mean, and that way you can get back to it. You can sort of just get back in there and get it, get after it again, and kind of just do it the right way. Especially, in boxing, like oftentimes that surface area, having those bigger gloves, that surface area landing with that impact and force, when someone can really crack like that, man, I can fucking do some damage. Like, I know a lot of people sort of watch MMA and they see the 4 ounce, the people wearing 4 ounce gloves and sort of stuff like that. But man, for my money, it fucking looks like, and also it feels like, tell you, it hurts a lot more getting fucking mollywopped with a big glove than it does with a little glove. Like that bigger surface area, that bigger force of impact, like it's going to do some damage. And especially when you have some of these guys who are just like, they're boxers. That's what they do. That's what their craft is. It's what they build on daily, and it's what they work at, so to get cracked like that, when it's like, it's not like sparring, and it's not like you're just there doing some light work. Like you're there in front of a dude who's trying to knock your face off. Like it's better to be safer than to kind of sort of just try and go again and go out on your shield and do that sort of bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was a bit of a similar scenario in the Garside versus McFerrin fight that was on before that. Garside stopped McFerrin in I think maybe the 10th round or somewhere around there, or 9th or 10th round. It was
later, yeah, it was
later
definitely
on.
later.
Yeah. It was again, McFerrin seemed to be sort of defending. He seemed to be kind of still there, but he was getting lit up. So I think the referees probably saved him from himself there. But Garside looks the goods as well. He's he was much faster and more accurate than McFerrin in the end, and he looks a pretty slick prospect.
Yeah, you can tell that the Olympic pedigree is translated nicely into now him being a professional boxer and pursuing it now. In that capacity. And, credit to McFerrin and his team, man. Like, obviously, they came to fight. And although it didn't go his way, I did see that the bloke was back in the gym, like, the very next day or 1 or 2 days after the fight. So, straight back to it, straight back to work, and straight back to, getting after it. And obviously, to step in there with someone like Garside and kind of get after it is always going to be a big test and a big ask. And, for the fight to go as long as it did, and kind of for him to sort of, still be in there throwing and trying to sort of still get after it, you can't help but respect that. Obviously, you got to highlight Garside's ability, his speed, his accuracy, his distance, everything like that. Like it can, it's why he's able to put on such a performance and, do what he did in there. But you need someone in there that's going to allow you to do that, if you know what I mean. Like, no one really outside, there's like very few times where someone's just in there and they're just getting bashed, and like that's kind of just the sort of layout. Garside's only able to look that good in a fight like that because the opportunities are there presented to him by his opponent where he can, slip punches, counter, get out of range, get back in range, use his speed, use his accuracy, use his experience, rely on his Olympic pedigree that he's got behind him. You can only do that if the person in front of you is going to be like, allow the opportunities for that to happen. you know, that's something I think people forget a lot. Like when you see some of these fighters go out there and like whether it's boxing, it doesn't matter, but specifically boxing, if you see someone out there and they're just putting on a show and they're just looking the goods, that's only because they're being given enough opportunities by the person that's in front of them for them to be able to do that. If the person wasn't a sort of a willing dance partner, or, you know, you're probably not going to see that. Although they might still win the fight and they're going to get the nod or whatever's going to be the case, they're not going to be able to showcase their full range of abilities. They're probably not going to be able to get a finish or one of those clean knockouts everyone loves to see, because they need that other person to sort of be willing to stand in the fire and trade with them and get after it. So, you know, whenever I see someone that is willing to do that, regardless of the result of the fight, if they don't necessarily win, it's always fucking wicked, because that means that, you know, that means that they're there and they're actually like fighting and they're trying to get after it. They're trying to win, and that, you know, they want to be there, not just kind of like in there for the sake of being in there or for a paycheck or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, a couple of guys who certainly wanted to be in there was Trent Girdham and Huss Hamden. That fight really stole the show for me. That was a brilliant fight to watch. And
Good fight.
Yeah, I thought your guy Girdham, he looked good. He was he was tough as nails. He took some hard shots along the way, and you know, Hamden, he obviously he had the edge, I guess, on hand speed and sort of general sharpness, but it felt like he only fought in spots for me. And yeah, did you think Girdham won that fight? We know that Hamden got the decision in the end, but yeah, it looks like Girdham might have done enough for me. But yeah, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of watching it, I thought, you know, it was very close, obviously, but I thought the knockdown in the first would have kind of sealed it for Trent, watching how the fight played out. But I'll give, like, I was talking to Volko about it actually, and he made a really good point, so I'll credit him on this. He said towards the end, like the end of some of the rounds, even though they weren't like overly crazy sort of significant punches that were like putting you on skates or anything like that, Trent kind of allowed him to throw some punches at the end of the round. And then, you know, if it's a close round and he's throwing them punches, like, I hate to say it, we know boxing's not exactly the most fair sport in the world. You know, those rounds got given, you know, some of those rounds got given to Huss, and you know, had it been the other way around, if it was, you know, a close fight like that and towards the end, Trent was like, Huss was allowing him to sort of work a bit more and Trent was landing those punches and getting that stuff. I got to be honest, I don't think it would have gone to Trent. I don't think the rounds would have been given to him. And, you know, that's a pretty shit thing to have to sort of say and deal with. But I kind of have to agree with Volk on that. Like, it's kind of just, it was almost like there was some close rounds. And then even though he didn't really, you know, wasn't in danger from some of the shots that Huss was throwing, he was allowing him to sort of do some work towards the end of the rounds. And I think maybe that's, you know, kind of helped Huss get a decision or like leaned it his way or in his favor. But for my money, watching it, even though like Trent's obviously one of my friends, one of my training partners, so I'm going to back him. But like, fuck, there was a good fight, and watching it back, it was close. But I feel like the knockdown is kind of what separates such a close fight. Like, almost like, you know, I'm kind of inclined to agree with some people. Like 3-3, the knockdown seals it for Trent. Like, if if we're going to go off how close the fight was, you got put on the canvas and he didn't. So, like, fuck, what are we doing?
Yeah, and that's a 10-8 round too. If it's 3 rounds to 3, then, you know, Trent's got a 10-8. That makes it 57-56, right? So
yeah,
you know, but yeah, it was a brilliant fight. But you know, and we talked about this the other day. But I know, did anyone tell the commentary team that Trent Girdham was in the ring? Like, yeah, I really wanted to bring this up on the because it made me kind of sick just watching it. We know that Huss is like, you know, he's a fancied sort of prospect. He's a son of you know, former world title champion in Nader Hamden. He's trained by Jeff Fennick, so he's sort of the A side really on the you know, in the fight. But you know, the commentary was just so one-sided. Like they were kind of saying like, oh, you know, Girdham's tough. You know, he's won some shots, but I'd really like to see Huss do this. You know, I think Huss needs to do that. Huss this, and it was just it was kind of a bit sickening to listen to. So I don't know if you noticed that when you were watching, but yeah.
Let them know, Dan. Get into them. Let the little dogs know. It was fucking ridiculous. Like, and I understand Trent's coming from an MMA sort of thing. He's stepping into a lot of boxing, and the dude was undefeated up until this point, and I guess that's pretty annoying for some people and pure boxing fans and people like that. But yeah, that's pretty fucking ridiculous, man. And it's like you're like, at the end of the day, okay, I understand commentary can be difficult depending on like how it's sort of set up, but you know, it's not that fucking hard to look at a fight independently and commentate it and, you know, give equal sort of props and praise to both fighters that are taking place, whether you have an invested interest in someone or not. I mean, like, it shouldn't be that hard to just kind of go to just break the fight down for what it is and commentate it, you know, without that sort of preference. Yeah, just look at it like for what it is. Don't fucking make it about like the one dude just because you might be, you know, you're obviously there, you're into boxing, that's kind of what you're sort of following and pursuing and you're talking about, and then you sort of just talk about the guy who's the boxer and not the other boxer in the ring, because at the end of the day, Trent said boxing, and I think he showed like he can box, and up until that point he's undefeated in boxing and tech, you know, like a lot of people, and I think a lot of boxing fans and a lot of people that I see that are into boxing think he won that fight. So yeah, it's whenever shit like that happens, like even if Trent won, like it's not like it's going to soften that or make it easier to sort of to swallow. Like you're still going to have to like watch the fight back if the result did go your way, and then you have to listen to the commentary being like, oh, well, fucking Huss is killing it, he's doing that. It's very similar to the commentary that we've seen, that we saw, like even with the Kuhn and Dibbs fight and MMA side of things. Like even towards the end, after he'd already been dropped, nearly put away, like we got the commentary's like, oh, well, look at Josh, he's coming forward, like, and I understand, like I get that, okay, yeah, cool, like, but like we got to talk about, like, we got to hype up both dudes. There's two people involved. You can't have the fight without the other person. Like, you know, you can't just. It's not like Huss is just in there himself, like shadow boxing, doing his own thing by himself. Like, there's the other person in front of him. Like we talked about that just before. You need a willing dance partner. Trent was certainly a willing dance partner, and these dudes got after it. So I feel like it's just a missed opportunity for you to appreciate what's happening in front of you and actually break it down that way. And like, I mean, if those guys want some lessons on how to commentate, if they want me to come and run them through, you know, if they want me to help them out, you guys know, you know, contact us, let us know, get up, you know, hit up Fight Talk Down Under. I'll give you a run through. It's not that difficult.
Yep, you know where to find us. There we go. That's normally that's normally sort of your role in this podcast, is to sort of call people out and that sort of thing. But I kind of went in there myself, so that was it was kind of liberating actually. I think I might do this again sometime.
Fucking get after them, dude. It doesn't matter who it is. Just tell them, let them know. And if they don't like it, they can come see me about it. We can fight about it.
Yeah, you can go see Lockjaw about it, as well.
Yeah, 100%. So, Dan's retired, but I'm not. I'm very much.
I'm retired, and I got a fucking jacked up finger from one training session. So leave me alone. I'm a journo.
And the best part is, and I said this about, I've already said this in the past about Billy Dibb. He's a dog. But at the end of the day, we're talking about boxing, and these boxers have a problem. Come see me. Because I can promise you, I'm not going to box you. I'm going to drop you on your head and elbow your face in. So just keep that in mind.
Yep. If you're handy, if you fancy an elbow to the face, and go and see Lockjaw. Now, one thing I wanted to cover up before we get off this the No Limit boxing. One thing I wanted to cover off was the post fight sort of melee, I guess you could call it. Like after the decision was read out. Trent was pretty upset. Like he obviously felt like he'd done enough to win, and he sort of left the ring without shaking Huss's hand. And we saw some footage later on that they sort of buried the hatchet backstage, but it sort of triggered a bit of a push and shove between their trainers in the ring, and it was a bit of an ugly scene. Like it's sort of I feel like it sets the sport back a little bit. It's all right. Do you want to just hold your can a bit closer to the microphone there?
I was like, I'll do it further away so it doesn't. But I was like, no, all right, it's happening. I committed to that.
But it's melees like that, they kind of set the sport back. I feel like it kind of has this sort of mongrel reputation, the sport, sometimes in the mainstream anyway, and things like that are the first thing that get published on the news websites the next day. Is there's a push and shove in the ring and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, what did you make of the scene post fight and sort of how that all went down?
Man, obviously, yeah. Like as a, I'm inclined to agree with you. It's not like shit like that's never going to be good for the sport. And like you said, even though it might be justified, or you might, the person, whoever, like whatever situation is, you might feel like in the moment, in the moment you're going to do things and you're going to react a certain way. And then in hindsight, you're going to sit back and go, fuck, probably shouldn't have done that. But like you said, the next day it's going to be the first thing that's brought up, first thing that's spoken about. But I mean, really, could have been worse. Like Trent could have fucking head kicked him and then just been like, okay, sweet. Like I'm going to go back to, like, I don't need to pursue boxing. I'm going to go back to fighting MMA or whatever, like whatever. He could have flying kneed him in the head. I don't know. Like, I feel so, walking out of the ring and kind of not shaking his hand is pretty chill. The bit of a push and shove or whatever, it's not good. Stuff like it's never good. I've certainly in my time done some shit like, after a fight where I'm kind of like, and then afterwards gone, oh, fuck, probably shouldn't have done that. But, you kind of, it's hard. Like at the end of the day, it's a sport where we get in, it both doesn't matter if it's boxing, whatever it is. It's a sport where you're literally getting in there and fighting someone. Like it's the most testosterone filled fucking activity that there is. And then, I think it's silly sometimes, especially when it's a situation like this where someone's like got a good case for the fact that they were pretty much robbed or they deserve to win. It's not surprising that there's going to be those sort of reactions, but obviously at the same time, it's not good for the sport and shouldn't be, shouldn't ever come down to that. I mean, but in saying that, I don't know. I've been in both situations where I've kind of like, afterwards I've kind of been chill and kind of like, just like let something slide. But then there's other times where I was kind of like, nah, fuck that. Like, and you kind of just go on how you feel in that moment. I mean, like, obviously Trent, for the most part, it wasn't really Trent that did anything. He was kind of, obviously walking out of the ring and that, people are going to have their words to say about that. But, at the end of the day, someone just getting out of the ring and not shaking someone's hand is a lot better than if there was a bit of a push and shove and he was involved and then he turned, like I said, he turns around and just elbows a dude in the face or some shit. And now we're talking about, fuck, like every news headline's like, MMA fighter elbows boxing, elbow his boxing opponent because of a decision, whatever. Like, fuck, God forbid some shit like that happens and it just sets back everything. It's like, you don't want that. So, could be worse.
Yeah, and I guess it is the fight game. It's a stressful and an emotional sport. So things do spill over, and at the end of the day, sportsmanship prevailed. They did bury the hatchet backstage, as the footage showed. So hopefully that gets as much coverage as all the stuff that happened in the ring.
Unfortunately, though, it won't, because nobody really. Like especially when it comes to to that side of things, people thrive on controversy and they thrive on shit like that. So I mean, a lot of people are going to appreciate that and go, oh look, okay, they're able to sort that out. But at the end of the day, when we see some shit happen where there is like a brawl in the ring or a punch on or like something post fight, or people are gonna hook onto that a lot more, and it's going to get a lot more focus and a lot more appreciation because people love controversy, love crazy shit. At the end of the day, people latch on to people doing wild shit because they themselves aren't in a position where they can do that wild shit. So they're going to see someone do that and be like, yeah, fuck, okay, and just that's good. I want to see more of that, even though, because at the end of the day, if you're not directly affected by it, you're not involved, it's very easy to be like, yeah, fuck yeah, for sure they should have, like, whatever, man, who cares that they did that? But when you kind of look at it objectively, you're kind of like, all right, well, fuck, maybe that shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, I guess a post-fight push and shove is a more compelling story than a heartwarming little sort of handshake backstage later on, isn't it? So it's always going to be it's always going to be what people go to. But I guess also in boxing circles on the weekend, we saw Jamel Charlo defeated Brian Castano by round 10 TKO to unify all the belts, and it was a rematch after a draw in 2021, but. I guess the reason it's mostly of interest to us is that Tim Tszyu Our very own Tim Zhu is a WBO mandatory challenger, and he has been for some time. But I guess the complicating factor is for Tim is that Sebastian Fundora is the mandatory for the WBC, and there's also a mandatory in the WBA. I read earlier today who's actually been waiting for longer than Tim Zhu has. So it's that's sort of the complicated reality of being a unified champion. It's just. It's notoriously difficult to hold on to all the belts, and I think that's probably going to count against Tim Zhu in this one. If you've got all the chocolates there, then the WBO is probably the first one that you're going to bite off if you have to not face a mandatory challenger. What do you reckon?
Yeah, like that sort of things is super weird. Like, because in my head, it shouldn't be that difficult to sort of fucking do it. You just kind of go, I've got all the belts. All right, I'm going to fight you, and then I'm going to fight the next dude, and then I'm going to fight the next dude. And then I just I don't know. As a fighter, I'm kind of just like, it's hard for me to look at that and go, just fucking fight the people that you meant to, that are mandatory and that you meant to fight. Let's just fight them, get them out of the way, fight the next dude, get them out of the way, fight the next dude, get them out of the way. And then, you can start looking at some of these other things. You want to move up in weight. You want to go for another belt. You want to start fucking having some of these more lucrative fights that could potentially happen, a la fucking Canelo Gennady type shit. You want to start doing stuff like that. But then obviously as a fan of boxing and someone that sort of follows the sport quite well, I understand. It is super difficult for them to kind of put all that together, because like we talked about before, it's going to make sense for the athletes themselves that are fighting. And then obviously the promoters have to look at it, and they're going to be like, okay, what's going to give us the most money? And
that's where the big snag is.
Yeah, and it puts someone like Tim in a fucking pretty shitty spot. And then Charlo made it pretty fucking clear that he does not give a fuck about Tim. I don't know if you saw, but they were talking to Tim, and he was talking about his hands, and he was talking about how he's like, oh, I'm pretty much going to be good. It's all coming together. And then obviously we've seen Charlo come out and say, he's like, isn't that dude even not available? So what the fuck are we talking about? And that's pretty rough, man. If you're the mandatory challenger for a belt, and the person that's holding that said belt is kind of man, you're not even on my radar. And I think I did, even before the fight with Castano now, the rematch after they had a draw, even he was already before that, he's talking about moving up in weight and doing all these other things. So that's the thing about the sport that people forget sometimes is in boxing, you have the thing is where it's set up, because there's so many different sanctioning bodies, there's so many different belts, and it is set up that way that you have mandatory challenges, and then, there's all these other things that come into play. But at the end of the day, boxers are individuals with their own plan, their own career, their own advisors, their own coaches, their own people around them. So they're going to have their own sort of pathway, their own goal for themselves, and their own thing that they want to do. And unfortunately, it ends up being a lot of the time when you unify all the belts like this, it ends up being a curse, because it sets you up in a position where, like you said, you've got all the chocolates and you can sort of dictate what you want to do. And then you are going to have the people like Ken Boses who are going to be like, let's go. I want to fight whoever it is, the best dudes, and I just want to keep racking them up, and I want to keep fighting these guys, and I want to keep all my belts, and I want to defend them, defend this whole shit, and just keep going. And then you're going to have the guys now where they have all the belts, and then they throw a spanner in the works. People are like, well, you could have this fight with this dude. You could fight Tim Zhu, then you could fight the next challenger for another belt, and you can fight the next guy for another belt, or whatever it is. Or they might go, you know what, fuck it, I'm going up to another weight class, and I want to fight the champion of that weight class. Or, who knows? They might just throw a complete spanner in the works, and you start talking about a fight that makes sense financially for that person and his promoter and the people behind him, but doesn't necessarily when it comes to what's happening with the belts and who the challengers are and how that all factors in. It's sure weird. That's the weird part about boxing. It's that and that just pure promotion side of things that's always going to be a weird thing to wrap your head around, especially because that's for people like us. We watch the sport, we follow it, you know all these sort of things and all these factors. Imagine someone who's just a casual fan of the sport. They're sitting there going, well, why the fuck isn't he fighting these people? Well, because at the end of the day, they're mandatory. Yeah, they've got mandatory challenges, but really, I'll make it just be like, yeah, fuck it, take that belt. I don't care. Like, do whatever you want. I'm going to go and fight this dude for more money and go do my own thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like at the end of the day, boxing is about the dollar, and there's just so many stakeholders between all the promoters and managers, and the networks and all the people that are involved in promoting a fight. It's just at the end of the day, it's got to be the most lucrative opportunity. And when you've got 4 belts, there's always going to be a mandatory challenger, right? You could pick off the mandatory challenger for the WBO, you could pick off the WBA, you could pick off the IBF, but then the next one's going to bubble back to the top, and you're just going to be picking off mandatory challengers forever. And most of the time, they're not the most lucrative fights that are out there. And like we've talked about, this is prize fighting. And when you've got those belts, that's when they've got to strike while the iron's hot. You got to just pick the most lucrative fights, whether that's upper weight class or down a weight class, or a fucking old former champion or whatever. Most of the time, they're gonna abandon a belt just to get those sort of more lucrative opportunities. So it is the way that boxing is set up. There's just so many different sanctioning bodies, so many different networks and things like that, and everything has to line up. They have to. The deals are so complicated because there's so many stakeholders. They can't just pick off a fight every 3 months and just bang, 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 just bang them out. They just got to, they've got to pick the most lucrative fight while they're at the top, and while they're in their prime.
And that's something that, like, I think a lot of fighters coming up, whether it's in boxing, MMA, it doesn't really matter. Like, that's something I think that a lot of guys are sort of forgetting. I know for me, even personally, like I'm 14 fights into my pro career as an MMA fighter, and it's only been in recent times, like pretty well in coinciding with when I moved to freestyle, where I've actually remembered that, or actually been like, you know what, I'm a prize fighter. This is prize fighting. We're out here. This is how you make your money. Like, this is the thing. Obviously, it's like I've had the approach where it's like, I'll fight anyone at any time. Doesn't matter the notice, doesn't matter the weight, doesn't matter what the fucking goes. Like, I'm there, I'm ready to fight. Like, that's what I want to do. And it's not even like I'd love to make it a simple thing of just saying, well, yeah, okay, I want to do that because I just want to, like, that's what I want to be known for, whatever the fuck the case is. But that's not really it. It's just because, like, at the end of the day, it just boils down to, I fucking love fighting. But now I'm kind of looking at it for that point of view as well. And even, I'm kind of going like, all right, well, what's going to make the most sense, both financially and exposure wise? And I've already, and I think from my situation now where I'm kind of looking at that, taking that sort of boxing approach, or like approach to it too, like, what's going to make the most sense financially? What's going to make the most sense exposure wise? I mean, and if people turn around and go, well, why aren't you fighting this person? Or why aren't you doing this? At this point now, I can turn around and be like, well, go fuck yourself. I've already fought. I've fought these people. I've fought up in weight. I fought at short notice. I've taken all the risk. Now, I can still take risks and fight some, like, people, but I can do it in a smarter way where I'm like, well, I'm going to benefit better from it. And I feel like in boxing, that's a thing that people do really well, but oftentimes, yeah, it's going to take away from the just the pure, like, well, you have to fight this guy. Yeah, you have to fight this guy. He's fucking earned his spot. You're the champion. Fight that dude. And yeah, oftentimes, like you said, it's not going to make sense for them to just keep doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And pardon me, Charlo was, we were talking about this, the other day as well. Charlo's issued a pretty brutal slapdown of Tim Tszyu in an interview, basically saying he's not up to scratch because he got dropped by Terrell Gausha in his last fight, and that he basically said he's never going to fight him. Now, we don't know if that's sort of gamesmanship or whatever, but it sounds like he's probably not going to be taking on Tim Tszyu next. And like we were saying earlier, it's interesting with the undefeated records are so important in boxing, but Tim Tszyu's undefeated, and just the fact that he copped a flash knockdown in the first round against Terrell Gausha is now counting against him.
Detriment.
That's just how fine the margin for error is in boxing. So, and actually, Tim Tszyu's team came out today and said that they're actually negotiating with Charlo's team at the moment. So they feel like it was kind of just a bit of gamesmanship there. But it's that easy in boxing to be able to just latch onto something as a reason to not fight someone or to knock someone down a peg. So yeah, it's been an interesting little back and forth already. Yeah,
well, I mean, and you're never going to know, because obviously unless you're like directly involved with a fighter, or you know them personally, or you kind of deal with them in that capacity, you're never going to know what the actual thought process is behind things. You're not going to know whether that's whether he's being legit in saying that, and is it because he really feels that way? He's like, well, fuck, that dude got dropped by that dude. I'm the champ. He's not on my level. Like, why am I going to waste my time and fight this dude? It could be that. I mean, at the end of the day, it could be that, or it could be a fact of he's like, I don't want that fight. Why the fuck am I going to take the risk and fight someone like that who could potentially beat me when I can fight someone else who's got no chance and I'm going to make a lot of money out of doing so. And at the end of the day, that's what that comes back to when you're the champ with all the chocolates, and you can sort of make those decisions, and your team's going to advise you with what they think, and you're going to do what you think. It's just, that's going to be a thing, So unless you know that person, or unless you are Charlo, you're not going to know what's legit and what's not. But, being that he is the unified champ and he's, the man in that way, it's kind of like, it's going to be hard to be like, oh, well, he's scared to fight, or he doesn't want to fight Tim Tszyu, or like, I feel like, it is just a bit of a sort of a way to pump it up a bit and be like, well, you're not even worth my time. Then they fuck around and announce a fight a week from now or 2 weeks from now. And then we're like, all right, well, the fight's happening and it's got that build up already. Yeah, it's important. It is prize fighting, and you kind of have to write a story, and you've got to sell it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's again, Hardman versus Rafa. They sold the story, and it ended up being a big event. But Brian Castano actually said himself that if he got an offer to fight Tim Tszyu in the US and it made sense, then he would probably take it. So looks like Tim's got some options there. And also Tony Harrison has called him out on social media, saying that he wanted to fight him in Australia, which is kind of an interesting one because reportedly the fight was agreed in 2021, but Harrison didn't sign his end of the contract. But if Charlo's not available, I feel like Tony Harrison would be just the perfect step up from Terrell Gausha for Tim Tszyu. That would just be a nice logical step in his career for my money anyway. And he's a former world champion. He has a win over Jamel Charlo, so I think Harrison would be a good option if Charlo is in fact not going to fight Tim Tszyu.
Yeah, 100%. But I think the only way Tim Tszyu should fight back in Australia is if he fights Rafa, or if he's the champ and he comes, he's defending his belt in Australia, because it's not going to make much sense for him to fight back in Australia. Other than that, he's obviously made his US debut. He's kind of like, that's where you kind of want to be fighting. You want to you're going to get a lot more eyeballs. You're going to get a lot more appreciation, unless, you are the champ and you kind of, you have that draw to you because you are the champion. People want to see what you do. Like we just saw with Tyson Fury fighting at Wembley. Like, look how many people were there. Look how many people tuned in. But it's because he's the champ and he's the man. So, outside of a Zerafa fight, it's not really going to make sense for Tim Tszyu to fight back in Australia unless he's a champion and he's defending a world title. Or multiple.
Yeah, that's a brilliant
titles.
point actually, because he's he's made his US debut now, and he's had the win over Terrell Gausha on TV over there. His name's on everyone's lips over there now. He's been connected with Charlo, so yeah, it makes perfect sense for him to fight over there. And he's obviously he's sort of signalled his intent to continue to sort of build his brand over in the US. So while Tony Harrison looks like he might be there, he might actually be up for a fight now. But it makes sense for Tim Tszyu to be over there, sort of building his brand. So that's a good shout.
Yeah, 100%. So it's a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Now, just in local news, I just wanted to cover this one off. We saw a Hex Fight series got cancelled. It was scheduled for May 27th, and again, just I guess it's the COVID era, and just MMA in general. But a few fights have dropped off, and the show got cancelled. So what do you know about that?
Yeah, I feel like a couple of fights got fallen through with injuries, COVID, fucking all that sort of shit, man. And we obviously saw the previous Hex event. Actually, no, wouldn't have been early in the year when I fought on Hex. Obviously, that card ended up having 5 fights on the card because so many fights fell through because of injuries and COVID and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know. For my money, it seems like, I don't know what's going on, but it seems like pullouts and injuries I shouldn't say injuries, but just pullouts in general in MMA have just kind of skyrocketed. And I don't know I don't know why, but it just seems like there's a lot more than there were previously. But yeah, obviously we had Hex fall through. We had even just here down my way, and we had SFC, which is like another local promotion that's just starting out. That's kind of doing events where they're trying to do monthly events where they're doing like boxing, kickboxing, and MMA, like separate events, separate shows for each one. Their card, same thing. Like 70% of the card, fell through with like injuries, COVID, fucking all that sort of shit. So, I mean, that's rough. And I think in Melbourne now too, it's kind of like, we had that with Eternal. Now you've had Hex fall through. So fuck, it's been a rough time in Melbourne, specifically for like some of these like MMA shows. Obviously we've got Demolition coming up and stuff like that. And it's like, fuck, man, if I was in Melbourne and I'm an MMA fan trying to go to a show, I'd be like on edge going like, what the fuck, is it going to go? Or is it going to get scrapped? Because are they going to like just lose their whole fight card?
Pretty much, yeah. We just don't get excited about events down here until we're actually in the building and we can see the cage there.
It's I feel that. It's like until it's like actually happening and you're like, oh shit, okay, we're here. I mean,
because it's fucking freezing down here. So once someone gets COVID, then just everyone's got it because
everyone's just falling out. But obviously, I mean, like, it's pretty shit that event fell through. I was pretty keen for it, and a couple of fighters outside of that, like there's a couple of fighters obviously on the card who had fights like just fall through in general, with like opponents falling out, replacements falling out. And it's been a rough time for them. So it's been a rough time for some of the fighters. It's been a rough time for the promoters, obviously trying to throw that together, and the sort of people behind the show. And there's a couple of fights that now, because of most of the card falling through, there's a couple of fights that we're not going to see. Like, there was some scraps matched up on that show, and I mean, for my money, I was super keen to see the Barber versus Kakembo fight. Like, I was fucking hyped for that. I was, because obviously I fought Michael Barber. He's a tough dude. He comes forward. He's just a violent dude. Just likes to scrap at the end of the day. Kakembo's looked the goods, so far in his pro career, and he's fighting at featherweight. It seems like he's settled in nicely into that sort of weight division. Previously, he fought at bantamweight. So whenever events fall through like that, man, it's rough, because you're kind of like, as a pure fan of the sport, you're just like, fuck, I wanted to see them fight. I wanted to see this sort of stuff happen. But hopefully they can sort of throw something together and be back down there soon doing another show. And hopefully we'll just go from there.
Absolutely, yeah. Tough time to be a promoter here in Melbourne, that's for sure. But and we're going to go a bit overtime here, but we've shown a pretty blatant disregard for the for the sort of 1 hour time limit so far. So if everyone's made it this far, then may as well see it through. But because we wanted to follow up a little bit on the PED talk, it's been a bit of a talking point around the around the traps since we kind of opened that can of worms a couple of episodes ago. So I know your inbox has sort of lit up since we talked about that, and there's a bit of a conversation starter in the sauna ahead of Eternal 65. But what's the general consensus been like? How much of an issue is this really?
Well, it's always going to be something that was going to be an issue, because obviously there is no testing or there's sanctioning bodies in the different states and that, and then it's up to them to sort of regulate that and dictate that. But it's not a thing that exists, and it doesn't happen. But obviously, like, in the aftermath of us talking about this, there's been a lot of things that have sort of been presented to me where people are like, this is a fucking problem. And, where people are like literally like saying, like, I fought such and such and this happened at like this, because they are obviously doing something they shouldn't be doing, and that's why this is happening. And like, it's a lot more prominent than I thought it was. And I think if you look at some of the matchups in recent time, especially some of the pro matchups that have been thrown together, you're sort of looking at the matchups and you're like, well, why are you fighting in such, like, you're not fighting in a weight class that you fighting. Why you're fighting there's like some, you're fighting at like a catch weight, or you're fighting in a weight class like that is a weight class, but it's not really a weight class because for whatever reason. And like, it's being spun and put forward in a way like, oh, well, it's because this person's one of those people that's in between. Like, for example, they're not quite a lightweight, but they're not quite a welterweight. So we're kind of like meeting in the middle. But is it that, or is it like, is it because you're on stuff that you shouldn't be on, and you kind of can't get down to the weight that you fought in previously because you've now opened up that PED's can of worms, and you've kind of been doing that, and the lowest point you can get down to is this sort of in between weight, because you don't want to fight at, for example, if you're a guy who is on stuff and you are taking those sort of things, but you can't quite get yourself down to lightweight, for example, and then you don't really want to fight at welterweight, because even though you are on those things and you are taking those things, you don't want to fight like against like welterweights who are like legit welterweights who are massive human beings who are going to walk into the cage the next day at like 88 kilos or fuck, who knows? That's not really going to do you much good anyway. At the end of the day, the point of performance enhancing stuff is to enhance your performance and to give you the best chance that you feel you're going to get to have the most success. So I can understand people's apprehensiveness to not take fights, and kind of, unless they're going to be offered in sort of like an in-between sort of thing that's going to suit them in the best way, that they're going to perform in the most optimal way. So that's certainly happening. Obviously, there's people that are on the gear, and there's people that are having to fight these people that are on the gear, and they shouldn't have to, or they shouldn't need to. But that's just how it is. It's just a part of the game, and it's up to you to pick what fight you want. And you can say yes to a fight, say no to a fight, and you can do what you want to do. And I understand you want to fight. You want to fight in your weight class where it suits you and what the best thing is. And if you can't get fights, or there's certain matchups that get offered your way, but they're trying to like they present it to you in another sort of in between at a catch weight or some shit like that. And the only reason that is happening is because you're pretty set on, or you're pretty certain on the fact that it's happening because the guy that you want to fight, or that you're being asked to fight, is using some stuff for a bit of an edge or whatever, and that's why it's got to happen that way. Yeah, obviously I understand you're going to be pissed off and stuff like that, but until it gets to a point where it's enough of a problem that CSA or the sanctioning bodies like in these different states are going to justify being able to pay the money to do the testing, it's just kind of going to be one of those things you just kind of have to swallow it and fucking deal with it. You're going to have to just fight dudes who are on the source and just kind of deal with it and hope that when you progress forward and you get to the point where you're fighting in the UFC or et cetera, it's a lot more, it's managed better and it's actually dealt with better, and you just kind of have to put your faith in that. But outside of that, I think you just kind of have to accept it. I mean, I think that's kind of just where it's at.
Yeah, I guess, we know in the local promotions there's not a whole lot of money in it, and I think that's the big issue. Like you say, no one's going to stump up the cost to sort of actually implement testing and stuff. So, and I don't know how much PED testing actually costs, but as a fighter on the local scene, and I also know that you don't really sort of care too much that your opponents are on the juice or anything like that, but would you as a fighter be willing to sort of take a haircut like to the tune of a few $100 or something if it meant introducing drug testing procedures, or is that something that would be difficult to kick into play?
It's going to be hard to put that into sort of play, but it'd be different if so say like Eternal's obviously the biggest promotion in the country, the most lucrative, the most successful, and obviously they just got like the bigger platform and all that sort of stuff. If Eternal is working with like the sanctioning bodies in the states that they fight in, and they go, okay, yeah, we're going to put this in play, and obviously, and they go, okay, but here's how it's going to work. If you fight for us, we test everyone that fights for us, but whatever your fight purse is, X amount's taken off the top because we have to be able to justify the testing, and we're going to make it like affordable for us and for and sort of make it a thing. Then yeah, it's going to, but then it's more of a consensus thing. Obviously, people want to fight on a promotion like that because it's great exposure, especially for the pros. It's live on UFC Fight Pass, gets replayed on ESPN. And it's built up. Like, I've seen this promotion go from the grassroots sort of starting point to just skyrocketing all the way to where it is now. So, if someone like that, just, if Cam and Ben decide, it's something that they're going to do, then I think, yeah, then it might be a bit different. But even then, at the end of the day, we've spoken about this. It's got to make sense, but it's got to make money to make sense. And if it doesn't make money and it's not justifiable financially, it's not going to come into play. And like you sort of touched on, there's a couple of people like me that, don't give a fuck at the end of the day because they're like, whatever, like take all the steroids you want, do what you got to do. It is what it is. But, if, like we've spoken about, for some of these amateurs and some of these other people that don't want to have to deal with that, like they just adamantly do not want to have to fight people that are on the gear, then yeah, you can kind of sympathize for that and you can kind of go, well, fuck, maybe we should look at something like that. But it's always going to be just a hard thing to kind of just throw together. I mean, outside of, some of the promotions getting together and promoters getting together and kind of doing that and working with the sanctioning bodies to kind of do that and, justifying it by going, okay, look, it's in your contract. If, whatever your fight purse is, 10% of it or 20%, whatever the fuck the goal is just taken off the top. That's going to pay for fucking drug testing or like PED testing or whatever. And that's just how it is. Take it or leave it. It's up to you. You don't have to fight for us. You don't have to do that. But if you want to, that's part of it. The other option, the only other alternative outside of that is some fucking dude with a lot of money who cares about the sport and loves it and is fucking a big fan of it and wants to throw some money into the sport and do that. That's the only other option, I guess, that where that can happen. I mean, you want to be optimistic and you want to sort of think that the sport's going to get to a point here where it is sort of at that point where it's justifiable and financially able to do that, where you can go, okay, we're going to do that. We're going to start like testing people and we're going to be doing that. But you can't expect all these promotions to be doing that. You can't expect all these little promotions, smaller promotions that are still building their way up and doing those things. And especially some of these promotions where the target build-up crew is building up amateurs, like Proving Grounds, for example. You've got like Demolition and, Bushido and all these other promotions. They're not necessarily these massive promotions that are like stacked full of pros and doing all this sort of thing. They're opportunities for amateurs to get the experience they need to eventually go pro, to build themselves up, to move forward. And you can't expect these small promotions to fork out all this money to do drug testing. But then, at the same time, that makes it rough for some of these amateurs, man. They got to fight, like they're fighting a dude. They might potentially fight a dude who's on all the fucking sauce and you're not even getting paid for it. And, God forbid you lose, get your head punched in, you're getting your head punched in by a dude who's fucking clearly cheating. And then, you're just going to kind of have to swallow that. And, it's something that you shouldn't have to deal with at the end of the day. Like in a perfect world, you shouldn't have to deal with people being on performance enhancing drugs or doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But unfortunately in sports, that's always been a thing. It's always going to be a thing. People are going to always look for those advantages. We'd love for everyone to be mentally strong and not need to have these sort of boosts, but that's not a thing. People are going to look for that. Some people are just going to do that, and it's always going to be part of it. And unfortunately, until you sort of build yourself up in this sport and get to a point where you're like fighting for the UFC, who work with USADA and do that sort of stuff, or it's just not, you just kind of have to accept the fact that you're more than likely going to fight people who are doing the wrong thing. As shit as that is.
You sort of mentioned there the idea of 10% or a percentage of your purse going towards drug testing and whatever. And I guess that's essentially what I was just putting on the table, just sort of brainstorming an idea there. And like you say, it's probably only feasible for the promotions like Eternal and maybe Hex, or the ones that have sort of got a full card of professionals on there. But is that something that you think would kind of turn fighters away? Like if fighters are looking at signing with one of the sort of bigger promotions in Australia, say if Eternal brought it in, do you think they would look at something like that and be like, no thanks, just for the financial reason? I don't know that many fighters are really relying on the paycheck at this stage of their careers. So do you think it would be something that would be kind of an attraction for people, or do you think it would be sort of something that would kind of deter people from signing with a promotion like Eternal?
It'd be it would deter more people from competing for Eternal than it would add people competing to Eternal. Because if people are already doing the wrong thing and cheating, why would they then willingly go fight somewhere where they're going to be put on the spot and, although it's not going to be like super high level fucking like USADA level testing or whatever, they're still not going to like, why would they take the risk of getting caught out and fight for eternal if it like that's what they're doing? At the end of the day, people that cheat in sport and do the wrong thing are just, they're mentally weak people that think that they need to find an edge that is going to benefit them moving forward. We spoke about this is prize fighting. You're here to make money doing it. You're doing it because you might have your other goals outside of that. But at the end of the day, you get paid to do this if you're a professional. So if you can put some odds in your favor and kind of do that in that sense, then you're not going to go somewhere and put yourself in a position where you're going to potentially get caught out or found out or whatever. You're going to try and like keep it get going how it is. And like, yeah, it's just weird. Like, it's just a weird part of it. It's such a, like, I can't comprehend it. Like I've said it before, there's only like one example of where I can understand where someone's like taking PEDs to compete in sport. And that was like the Tour de France when Lance Armstrong was competing, when number 1 to 18 are all on steroids. Like everyone's on PEDs and EPO and fucking doing all sorts of shit. So fuck, why wouldn't you? Like, why wouldn't you do that? If everyone else is doing it, then fuck, let's do it. And then we're going to see who can compete the best with those advantages. And obviously, Lance Armstrong showed he was the best at competing in that sort of field and in that sort of setup. But unfortunately, that's riding a fucking push bike. That's not punching another human being in the face and trying to like separate them from consciousness or choke them to sleep or trying to break their arm or trying to do some shit like that. Like, at the end of the day, we're getting in there and we're fighting. And if you're like, God forbid you get in there, because you don't know, man. Like, God forbid you get in there, you have like a fucking some iffy going on in your head, and you fight some dude who's juiced to the fucking gills and he punches you and KOs you, and then you end up fucking dying because you had a pre-existing issue or something. Like, and that wouldn't have happened if that person wasn't, it might still happen, but it might be more likely that it's happening because that person has an unfair advantage. It's just a weird setup. Like, I don't know. It's, I can't justify it in any way or any shape and form. I cannot relate to that in any way of like it's just, it's a stupid thing that exists, but unfortunately it does exist. And it's going to get to a point now where when things start shaping up the way they do, and I see some of these things happening where I'm kind of like, what the fuck? Why is that matchup taking place in that way? And what's going on here? Man, I'm going to start throwing you dudes under the bus. And I said this after we spoke about it. A couple of the people messaging me being like, man, you should sort out some of these dudes. You are the fucking people that I would throw straight under the bus. Like 100%. Like you're some of the people. So it's like, fuck, you don't want me to do that. If like, I'll put it out there. If people really want me to start outing people, I will. I'll throw people under the bus. I do not care. But keep in mind, a lot of you people that were asking me to do that are people that I would throw straight under the bus because, like, that's just how it is.
There you go. And, but for everyone to get involved in the discussion, like, you can hit us on the Fight Talk Down Under Facebook group, slide into our DMs. What do you think of the PED issue on the local scene? What are the solutions? Fighters and promoters, would you consider sort of, putting some money into the pot for PED testing, or do you not care? Just let us know. It's all it's an interesting discussion, and we're definitely interested to hear everyone's thoughts on that.
100%.
Now we've got to get to a fan question. We are a bit over time here. We've got this week's question. It comes from Jim Pratt. So shout out to Jim. Thanks for sending through the question. But his question is, Dan and Justin, what was the first fight that got you hooked into the sport of MMA?
I'll go first. Obviously, there's fights early on. I was watching the sport before this fight that I'm going to talk about, but the fight that really got me like stuck into the sport and like where I was like, holy fucking shit, this is like, look at this, like this is incredible. GSP Koscheck, the second one, after the Ultimate Fighter and after all that sort of build up, watching the Ultimate Fighter when it was still sort of broadcast live on network TV and sort of, keeping up to date, and then watching GSP and Koscheck fight, and seeing GSP defend a world title with a fucking jab. Like, from going from being someone that watched boxing growing up and all that sort of stuff, and then MMA starts being a thing, to see someone win a world title, defend their world title, primarily with just a fucking jab. Like, he jabbed Koscheck's face off in that fight. Like, that's pretty much how what won in the fight. And watching that and seeing someone like St. Pierre compete, and that he's a champion, and the way he sort of carries himself, the way he was fighting, the way he came into that fight, the shape he was in, and then obviously the work that he does, going out of his way to work with some of these people like Freddie Roach and some of these other sort of brilliant minds in singular disciplines. I think, I remember watching that fight going, holy fucking shit, like, this is insane. I mean, obviously I'd watched MMA like prior to that, and I was following sort of along in that, but I think that was the fight where it's a weird thing to say, but that was the fight for me where it swapped from being like that thought process of this is human cockfighting to just like, holy shit, look at this. This is incredible. Like, this dude is an amazing athlete, an amazing martial artist. And like, he's fighting someone who's a dangerous person. And look at that. He's just making him look like he doesn't deserve to fucking be there. And doing it with a single weapon in a sport that's opened up in such a way outside of boxing, where it's just with your hands. There's all these other weapons and tools and things that come into play. And he's using one weapon to defend a world title when the stakes are the highest. And the room for error is like, you can't have that. So I think, that fight was really a big turning point for me, where I was like, all right, this sport's fucking amazing.
Yeah, there you go. Well, for me, I was Tito versus Ken was the starting point for me. So I was quite young at the time. I was a WWF convert. So when I was younger, I used to love a bit of wrestling.
Same.
WWE now, isn't it? But I used to love that sort of thing. And Tito Ortiz, when he had the belt and he was dominating, he was the guy who sort of had a bit of crossover appeal. Like, you would read the news about the WWE and Tito Ortiz would sort of if he was fighting, it would sort of slip into the headlines there. So I had a 100%. Bit of an awareness of Tito Ortiz, and then when he came up against Ken Shamrock and this big rivalry kicked off, I knew who Ken Shamrock was, obviously from the wrestling days, and I heard that they were calling Ken Shamrock the world's most dangerous man, right? And I was like, wow, how is Tito Ortiz going to beat the world's most dangerous man? This is incredible. I had no fucking idea, right? Like, you think Ken Shamrock's this fucking mythical 41-year-old man who's got some incredible just death punch or something, which turned out to be far from the case. But it was kind of intriguing, an intriguing rivalry, and it sort of just kind of sucked me into the sport, and I started to sort of gain a bit of an appreciation for it from there, and started watching, and I'd sort of watch here and there. It wasn't that accessible here in Australia at the time, so I'd kind of just watch where I could, and it was really once the Ultimate Fighter kicked off that I sort of started to take a bit more interest in it. I think it kind of, at that point, it just went from this sort of seeing these guys in the house and seeing that they were kind of just like ordinary people and sort of just just up and coming athletes, just doing this sport. I think that was the point when the sport went from being this mythical, just sort of amalgamation of these killers from different martial arts. Then suddenly it sort of had this human element to it, and I think it was kind of it was really quite compelling, and I think that's sort of what the attraction of the Ultimate Fighter is. And so I started watching that, and I was pretty much hooked from there. And I really haven't looked back. I started off in boxing. Boxing was my first love in combat sports. I used to watch boxing with my dad when I was younger, and I absolutely loved it. But obviously still do. And once MMA came along, it was a real game changer. It was just something completely different, and there's just competitive matchups on every week in MMA. So that's why we love the sport.
There's two things to take away from that: the trash talk in the lead up to the fights with Tito and Ken, fucking terrible. Like, if you haven't ever seen the back and forth that these dudes had, or the stupid shit that they say, please do yourself a favor. There's compilations
Tito
on
Ortiz, YouTube. I will beat you into a living death.
Yeah, that's one of the best lines I've ever heard.
One of my favourite lines from the whole rivalry. So stupid.
And the other thing to take away from the crossover thing that happened, especially in the early days of MMA and WWE and WWF, whatever you want to call it, and to this day it still carries over, you aren't legit until you beat Undertaker at WrestleMania. So let's not forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess it was one of those rivalries though. Even though the fights were like they fought 3 times and all 3 fights were terrible. They were just literally just one-sided ass whoopings. But people still just tuned in. Like every time the rivalry kicked off again, everyone just thought that Ken Shamrock was going to turn back the clock. He's just that angry that this time he's going to muster something.
He's
that's
going to do something.
Make it competitive. But each
Ken
time he just got his
Shamrock?
ass whooped.
His trash talk was so bad it'd make Tito's trash talk look good. And then when I don't know if you people paid attention, but Tito's not really the best trash talker at all, or even a good one to start with. But it made him seem like he was fucking Conor McGregor. And then obviously we saw when Tito was scheduled to fight people who are a bit better at talking, I like Chael Sonnen. It didn't quite go his way. It was a 10-8 to everyone else that he tried to go back and forth with in the verbal side of things.
Oh, was it ever? Particularly the Chael Sonnen fight in Bellator. That was a one-sided beatdown on the microphone in the end. But we were talking about this. Lockjaw and I were talking about this recently. I got down the rabbit hole on Tito Ortiz and his terrible trash talk. So if anyone's got a spare 5 or 10 minutes, do yourself a favor and look up on YouTube Tito Ortiz trying to speak English. It's fucking hilarious. It really is. Just some of the trash talk that he tries to put in place that it just goes awry. It's so good.
My favorite one outside of the stuff with Ken, there's a video of Tito Ortiz where they're like talking about, obviously he's interviewing him on a podcast or something, and they're like asking him about his training. And it's like, I can't talk, I don't know what the line, it's like specifically, but he's like, they're like, how often do you train? And he's like, yeah, I train 3 days a week. We usually do 2 sessions, but so it's like wrestling, bit of striking, that's 4 days a week. But we're doing that, the way it shapes up with my team, my coaches, it's like 5 days a week, but really it's like 7 days a week that we're training, but 4 days a week that we're doing sessions that end up being 6 days a week because we're doing it striking, wrestling, we're splitting it. So it's really, we're training 8 times a week, 4 times a day for 7 days a week, something like that. And it makes no sense.
Yeah. He just talked him around in circles. It was so good. And then one of my favorites was, he was on. I want to say that it was The Fighter and the Kid. Maybe he was on a podcast, and he said that he really hopes that he outlives his children. And they were like, are you sure about that? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And he like doubled down on it. You're like, oh my God. Like, they gave him a chance to sort of to save it as well, to right the ship, and he doubled down, and it was just so cringe. So, there you go.
There you go, folks.
Do yourself a favour. If you've got a minute, if you're down the rabbit hole on YouTube, we've all been there, then Tito Ortiz trying to speak English. I think that's what it's called. So, it's a brilliant highlight reel. But also, if you're down the rabbit hole on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe to Fight Talk Down Under, and keep your eyes peeled for episode 16, because it's going to be a huge preview of Eternal 66. We're going to touch on Demolition Fight Series 6 as well, which is going to be next weekend, and all the local news, and of course another fan question. So make sure you keep sending those fan questions in. Our details are below here somewhere on the screen, and they'll probably be in the description as well. And of course the Facebook group Fight Talk Down Under. You can leave us questions in there too if you like. And in the meantime, don't forget again, like and subscribe: YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, and Fight News Australia. Lockjaw, take us out.
I will leave you guys with this. First thing, head down to this little fucking area down here, see where it says my Instagram. Go follow that shit, because I'm still trying to build that back up after it got taken off me by Zuckerberg, my original Instagram. But that's beside the point. And the other thing I wanted to leave off with, guys, okay, we all love MMA. We're all fans of the sport. We all kind of, it's what we're into. People listening to this, people following along and stuff like that, I can understand. I want people to send me what they think is the worst fight in MMA so far, like in MMA history, because I want to know what people think. I want to know where it's sort of ranked at and where it's sort of put at. I don't care if you send me what you send me. It can be as far back as UFC 1, or I don't give a fuck. It can be from a local promotion. Send me the most boring fight that you think is the most boring fight in MMA, because I'm very curious. Because after the Rose Carla Esparza 2 fight, I don't think there's a fight that was worse than that. So please blow my mind. Send me some of these matchups. I want to go down the rabbit hole as we just spoke about, and I want to kind of see that because, yeah, I don't think there was anything worse than that. Like I thought the peak was Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis, but then Rose and Carla said, "Hold my shit. Let me show you what boring is." That fight was so boring. It made reading the dictionary interesting for me. I actually sat down and read my dictionary for an hour after that, and that was interesting for me. So, flick that my way. So I'll leave you with, and keep going, keep following, tune in. We're going to keep going.
Absolutely, and I've got one for you. We got to get out of here, but I've got one for you. I'm going to put down a nomination before anyone gets in. Nate Quarry versus Caleb Starnes in the UFC. Absolute stinker. So Lockjaw, jump on YouTube or Fight Pass and have a look at that one.
Yep, let's do it. I'm going to start off with that one.
I gotta watch it. You never know what might stop you. Here I am, climbing up.